obviously, you don't get here alone. I'm here because of God. I'm here because of my family, and I'm here because of my friends. And you're literally in this room because you made it happen.
A shocking twist has just shaken Washington. Kash Patel, once dismissed as a loyal Trump foot soldier, is now taking center stage, demanding answers from Liz Cheney over the January 6th committee. The stakes couldn't be higher. The former president is back in the White House. Cheney is under investigation. And Patel? He's not pulling punches. From accusations of witness tampering to claims of a political conspiracy, this battle is far from over. Could this be the moment that finally unravels the story behind the January 6th committee? Let's find out. On January 6, 2021, as the cold winter air gripped Washington, D.C., thousands of supporters of President Donald Trump gathered, convinced that the 2020 election had been stolen. Fueled by months of claims and legal challenges, they arrived with a singular purpose: to stop Congress from certifying the electoral votes that would make Joe Biden the next president of the United States. But what unfolded that day wasn't just another protest. It became one of the most chaotic and violent attacks on American democracy since the Civil War. As Trump stood at the Save America rally near the White House and urged the crowd to fight like hell, the words echoed louder than anyone could have expected. By early afternoon, barriers outside the Capitol crumbled under the weight of thousands. Among them were not just frustrated voters, but organized groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Some carried zip ties, shields, and makeshift weapons. Others scaled walls, shattered windows, and stormed past overwhelmed police officers. Inside, lawmakers scrambled for safety as the joint session of Congress was abruptly halted. Within hours, the Capitol, the very symbol of American governance, looked like a battlefield. Offices were ransacked, furniture was overturned, and historical artifacts were left in ruins. The FBI would later estimate that up to 2,500 individuals breached the Capitol that day. 5 people died within 36 hours, including a Capitol police officer. Another 4 officers, overwhelmed by the psychological aftermath, would take their own lives in the following months. Over 170 officers were injured. The property damage alone exceeded $2.7 million. For most Americans, the footage was unforgettable. But for Kash Patel, former Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense and a longtime ally of Trump, the story didn't end with the images of broken glass and tear gas. It was just the beginning of what he saw as a politically motivated response to a complex situation. Patel, like many in Trump's circle, believed there was more to the story, one that the official House January 6 committee deliberately ignored. As the committee, dominated by 7 Democrats and just 2 Republicans, including Liz Cheney, began its year-long investigation, it quickly became clear that its focus was not just on the violence but on Trump's role in the lead-up. The committee, led by Representative Benny Thompson and vice-chaired by Cheney, painted a narrative of a sitting president who, through tweets, rallies, and behind-the-scenes maneuvers, tried to cling to power. In 8 highly publicized hearings, Americans were introduced to Mark Meadows' frantic text messages, John Eastman's legal memos advocating for Pence to overturn the results, and the alarming resistance from Justice Department officials who threatened to resign rather than comply with Trump's wishes. The committee laid out a chilling 7-step plan they believed Trump executed to reverse the election results. Yet as these hearings played out on primetime television, Kash Patel, along with other Trump allies, saw something else, an incomplete picture. Patel argued that the committee selectively presented evidence, ignored conflicting testimony, and most importantly, refused to account for the security failures that allowed the breach to happen in the first place. Patel wasn't just frustrated, he was furious. He openly questioned why key witnesses who could have testified about pre-January 6 security assessments, National Guard readiness, and communication breakdowns were sidelined. Why had Liz Cheney, once considered a stalwart conservative voice, joined forces with Democrats to push a narrative that, in Patel's view, glossed over the government's own lapses in protecting the Capitol. Patel's concerns were more than personal opinions. He pointed to documents showing that Pentagon officials, including himself, had offered National Guard assistance days before January 6th, only to be met with hesitation or outright rejections by congressional security officials. He argued that the committee never seriously explored why those offers were declined or who made those decisions. In Patel's view, Liz Cheney wasn't just participating in an investigation, she was helping to control its direction. And with the committee's final report becoming part of the official historical record, Patel believed a dangerous precedent had been set. To him, the investigation wasn't just about holding Trump accountable, it was about protecting certain individuals and institutions from scrutiny while scapegoating others. While the committee's work concluded with recommendations to prosecute Trump, the former president's subsequent 2024 re-election and the dismissal of his federal charges only fueled Patel's determination to demand answers. As the public slowly turned the page on January 6th, Patel was ready to rip it wide open again. Because behind the shocking footage, the court cases, and the political theater, Patel believed there were still questions unanswered, and at the center of them stood Liz Cheney. Not because of what she said during the hearings, but because of how she supposedly went about gathering some of the information. Suddenly, whispers about witness tampering and ethics violations started making the rounds on Capitol Hill. What happened? How did Cheney, once leading the charge, end up in the hot seat herself? It all started with Cassidy Hutchinson, the young former White House aide who became one of the committee's star witnesses. Hutchinson had first approached the committee under the guidance of a lawyer with close ties to Trump's circle. Patel and others noticed that something didn't add up. Cheney, who was vice chair of the committee and also a lawyer herself, had reached out to Hutchinson directly, skipping over her attorney entirely. For many inside Washington, that was a big red flag. It wasn't just a small technical issue, it sounded serious. The rules that lawyers usually follow said you shouldn't contact someone who already has a lawyer without going through that lawyer first. So the Republican-led Oversight Subcommittee jumped on it. Their report claimed Cheney broke the so-called anti-contact rule, a legal guideline that's supposed to keep things fair when lawyers deal with witnesses who already have representation. And just like that, the story took a sharp turn. The report went further, urging the FBI to look into whether Cheney had not just crossed a legal line, but maybe even tampered with a witness. Patel didn't miss a beat. He saw an opportunity to hold her accountable and wasn't shy about calling for action. For her part, Cheney didn't flinch. She pushed back hard, calling the accusations dishonest and framing them as a political stunt. She argued that Hutchinson was the one who reached out to her, privately seeking advice because she felt cornered. According to Cheney, Hutchinson wasn't getting the help she needed from her original lawyer, so she stepped in to make sure the young aide could find proper, independent legal counsel. From Cheney's perspective, it was about helping a witness, not manipulating one. But Patel wasn't buying it, and neither were Trump allies who saw this as the perfect opportunity to flip the narrative. For years, Cheney had been one of the most vocal critics of Trump, publicly blasting him and painting the January 6th incident as his doing. Now, she was being accused of breaking the very rules she had defended. Patel began connecting the dots. He knew the power of timing, and the timing here was gold. Trump was about to be sworn in again after winning the 2024 election. Charges against him had already been dismissed. The energy among Trump supporters was back. And Patel wasn't about to let this accusation slide into the background. Trump himself wasted no time saying Cheney could be in big trouble and pointed straight at the subcommittee's report. The report wasn't subtle. It laid out how Cheney's actions might have broken more than just ethics guidelines. The big accusation was witness tampering. They argued that by stepping into Hutchinson's decision-making, Cheney had possibly influenced what Hutchinson said later in the hearings. This wasn't just some internal debate among lawmakers anymore. Now they were talking about the possibility of criminal charges. But here's where the story got even messier. Critics of the report quickly noticed that the rule Cheney supposedly broke might not even apply to her. Why? Because she wasn't working as a lawyer in the case. She wasn't representing the committee like an attorney represents a client. She was serving as a member of Congress. That small detail mattered a lot. The rule was designed for lawyers acting on behalf of clients, not lawmakers advising a witness on how to find a lawyer. Plus, there was another twist. Legal experts pointed out that Hutchinson had every right to seek advice outside of her original lawyer, especially if she felt uncomfortable or conflicted about the representation she was getting. So, Patel found himself navigating a tricky situation. On one hand, he had a report from a House committee urging the FBI to investigate Cheney. On the other, there were legal scholars and even some conservatives who quietly admitted that the case against Cheney wasn't exactly airtight. But for Patel, it wasn't just about the legal technicalities. It was about accountability, about exposing what he saw as double standards. He argued that if the committee had spent so much time accusing Trump of interfering with witnesses, why shouldn't Cheney be held to the same standard? As Patel turned up the heat, supporters of Cheney fired back, accusing him and the new Republican majority of trying to rewrite history. They said this wasn't about ethics. It was about payback. They believed the entire investigation into Cheney was designed to discredit the January 6th committee's work and protect Trump's image heading into his second term. But Patel was not backing down. In fact, he was just getting started. With Trump back in power and the political winds shifting, Patel's influence began to rise like never before. His appointment as the new FBI director, confirmed by the narrowest of margins, sent shockwaves through Washington. To many, Patel wasn't just another government official. He was the living symbol of Trump's return and the reshaping of federal power. Patel's climb to the top wasn't ordinary. Years before, he was a public defender, fighting small legal battles in courtrooms most Americans had never heard of. Yet here he was now, holding one of the most powerful law enforcement positions in the country. His loyalty to Trump had been unwavering, from helping draft the Nunes memo attacking the FBI's credibility to defending Trump during the Mar-a-Lago classified documents scandal. Every step brought him closer to this moment. Critics flooded the airwaves and Senate floor speeches with concerns. They said Patel was too extreme, too inexperienced, too willing to turn the FBI into a political weapon. They warned that he openly supported January 6th defendants, referring to them as political prisoners. They highlighted his efforts to raise money for those convicted of violently storming the Capitol. And they pointed to his statements under oath that didn't seem to match the facts, especially when he claimed to have no involvement in projects that he had actually organized. Inside the FBI, anxiety grew. Agents who had spent their careers investigating national security threats now wondered if their own jobs were on the line. Patel's critics said he was behind a quiet but aggressive push to remove agents who had been involved in January 6th investigations or who had crossed Trump politically in any way. Whistleblowers claimed Patel had already been involved in pushing out senior officials even before he officially took over as director. Some former Trump officials, even those who had once worked closely with Patel, came forward warning that he could not be trusted with the Bureau. Names like Bill Barr, Gina Haspel, and Mark Esper, all Republicans, openly questioned Patel's judgment and fitness for the role. They feared that Patel, now armed with the full power of the FBI, could be used to go after political opponents, reshaping the agency into something unrecognizable. But for Patel's supporters, this was exactly what they wanted. To them, the FBI had long been part of a so-called deep state, biased against conservatives, unfairly targeting Trump and his allies. They saw Patel as the bold outsider who would finally clean house, shut down what they saw as corruption, and restore what they called fairness. Patel didn't hide his intentions. In speeches and interviews, he made it clear that he planned to overhaul the FBI from top to bottom. He promised to stand up for what he called good cops and vowed to rebuild public trust. He said the agency had been politicized for too long and that its days of targeting Trump and his supporters were over. His past raised more eyebrows. Patel had written books supporting Trump, joined Trump's media company, and even produced children's books promoting pro-Trump narratives. He wasn't just an ally. He was deeply embedded in Trump's political and media machine. His critics saw this as proof that he could never separate the role of FBI director from Trump's political ambitions. Still, Patel had the votes. The Senate confirmed him 51-49, solidifying his hold on the Bureau. Almost immediately, agents and staffers began bracing for change. Some feared purges. Others prepared for investigations into those who had previously looked into Trump. And as Patel settled into his new office, the headlines were already swirling with speculation. Was this about law enforcement? Or was this about revenge? Was Patel cleaning up the Bureau? Or was he positioning it to serve Trump's political goals in the lead-up to future elections? The questions were endless, and the answers weren't coming anytime soon. But what made it all even more chilling was Patel's next move. He wasn't shy about it. He said it straight out. On day one, he'd shut down the FBI's headquarters, turn it into a museum, and scatter thousands of agents across the country. To some, it sounded like a bold reform plan. But to many others, it felt like a quiet purge hidden under a catchy slogan. Patel's critics weren't just worried about logistics. They feared the message. Send the agents out, break up the system, and rebuild it into something new, something loyal. As Patel rose higher, the phrase deep state became his favorite weapon. He wasn't the first to use it, but he sure knew how to make it stick. He blamed the deep state for everything, calling out unnamed officials inside the FBI, the DOJ, and other agencies, saying they were plotting against the people. Patel's supporters cheered him on, seeing him as the brave outsider who would finally drain the swamp. But others saw it differently. They feared Patel wasn't draining the swamp. He was bulldozing the guardrails of democracy. The fight over Liz Cheney became part of this larger story. Patel wasn't just accusing Cheney of breaking ethics rules. He was framing her as part of a secret plot. Her role in the January 6th committee wasn't just a political job. It was, in Patel's words, part of the deep state's plan to destroy Trump and anyone who stood with him. Suddenly, Cheney wasn't just a political opponent. She was an example, a warning to anyone else who dared cross the line. And it wasn't just Patel pushing this story. It caught on fast. Across social media, right-wing news, and even some mainstream outlets, Patel's message spread. The more he talked, the more people listened. His demand for an FBI investigation into Cheney wasn't seen as just a legal question anymore. It became a symbol of the growing battle between Trump's loyalists and those who dared to challenge him. Every accusation, every headline, every viral clip added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, Patel's past made everything more complicated. He wasn't some quiet government lawyer. He had written books, hosted podcasts, and sat on the board of Trump's media company. His fingerprints were all over the efforts to rewrite the story of January 6th. He had helped popularize the idea that the FBI and other agencies were working from the shadows, blocking Trump's every move. Now, with the title of FBI director, he wasn't just talking about it. He had the power to act on it. But with that power came fear. Inside the FBI, agents whispered about what was coming next. Would they be punished for past investigations? Would cases disappear? Would political loyalty become more important than evidence? These weren't just abstract worries. Agents who had worked on January 6th cases were already being reassigned, sidelined, or pushed to resign. Some were packing up their offices, unsure if they'd even have jobs next month. And outside the Bureau, the public watched, divided. For some, Patel was finally holding the system accountable. For others, it was a slow-motion takeover, the kind you don't notice until it's too late. Patel's critics pointed to his past statements about using the FBI to go after the deep state, and they asked, is this reform or is it revenge? At the same time, the country's democratic foundations were showing cracks. Independent organizations around the world were now rating the United States as a flawed democracy. Scholars who once avoided alarm bells were now raising them. Even some conservative voices, once loyal to Trump, started expressing quiet concerns about how far things were going. Patel wasn't slowing down. His push against Cheney was only the beginning. His real goal seemed much bigger. He was repositioning the FBI to be something it was never meant to be, an agency less focused on upholding the law and more focused on political loyalty. To Patel, this wasn't a problem, it was the point. And then came the ripple effect. Across the country, other institutions started feeling the heat. Judges, prosecutors, and even state officials began facing pressures they hadn't seen before. Some backed down, others stood firm. But everyone understood something had changed. The question wasn't whether Patel had the power. The question was how far he'd go. And that's where we'll leave it today. If you want to keep following this story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you turn on the notifications so you never miss an update.